Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the PoeticPaladin.ca YouTube gaming channel, your source for gaming news, reviews, and feature pieces from a Canadian perspective. This is a little bit weird because I was planning to launch this channel at the same time as I did the PoeticPaladin.ca website, but I am recording this well ahead of schedule, basically, just because with the new Steam refund system, there's been a lot of discussion. Some of it's actually gotten pretty heated, which is a little bit funny to me because it's like they've done this super consumer friendly thing, and then for some reason people are getting upset over it. And actually, I do think there are some valid points on both sides, which is actually what prompted me to make this video. I really thought it was an interesting situation where Valve can do something that's actually incredibly consumer friendly and then still have it have some issues. And I just think that's really interesting. So I wanted to talk about that a bit. So, first of all, let's just, before I go into any criticisms or talk about people's opinions on it, first let's just take a quick look at what the Steam refund system actually is, in case some of you have not read up on it yet, which is fine. Basically, the Steam refund page says you can request a refund for nearly any purchase on Steam for any reason. Maybe your PC doesn't meet the hardware requirements, maybe you bought a game by mistake, maybe you played the game for an hour and just didn't like it. And it's interesting because the limitations are I'm not sure I agree with all of them, but they are actually fairly open. So if you buy a game, you can issue a refund request for any reason if the request is made within 14 days of purchase and the game has been played for less than 2 hours. They also actually go on to say that even if you technically don't meet some of the requirements, like you're in some of the exclusionary criteria, like that applies to you, you could still submit a refund request, and that is fine. They will still take a look at your request. But I think if you just, like, if you meet all the criteria, then it's pretty much automated, is my understanding. The policy also goes on to say that refunds on DLC is okay within 14 days of purchase, just like the regular game, and if the underlying title has been played with for less than 2 hours since the DLC was added. So overall, it's basically the same policy that is for games, except for DLC. In-game purchases is kind of the same. If it's in a Valve-developed game, they will offer you a refund within 48 hours of purchase, so long as the in-game item has not been consumed, modified, or transferred. And third-party developers will have the option to enable refunds or not for those items. And then they go on to talk a little bit about bundles. Bundles is a little iffy because if the total combined game time of games in the bundle is over 2 hours, then it no longer qualifies. But I think again, you do have the opportunity to make a case, even though it says that you can't. They also go ahead and say, yeah, even if you are excluded according to these, you still can make a case, and then we'll take a look at it. So that's interesting. That's okay. And the only other exclusionary criteria really worth mentioning are that VAC bans. So if you've been banned by VAC on a game, so the Valve anti-cheat system, you don't have the right to refund that game, which seems okay, I guess. I mean, on one hand, you probably were abusing something, but I don't know, it might arise, might cause some issues. But again, that could be dealt with later on if issues do arise, rather than worrying about it now. The one really interesting thing about it that Total Biscuit actually mentioned in his content patch about the subject is that you can actually refund a game. It says right here that it's not considered abuse to request a refund on a title that was purchased just before a sale and then immediately rebuying that title for the sale price. So if you were to buy a game and then all of a sudden 50% off sale, then you do have the ability to get a refund and then purchase it again at the sale price, which is actually really nice. And it's definitely not something that they had to do, so I think that's kind of a cool thing. Overall, the whole policy seems actually not bad at all. You can access it at store.steampower.com/steam_refunds. So it's all of that is publicly available, and there is a bit more to it than that. But I think if you need more information, you can go look at that on your own. I just wanted to look at it for the sake of really to talk about some criticisms of it. So first of all, wow, I am so glad that this is here because this has just been a thing that it's been one of my major gripes with Steam for such a long time. It's actually like I can't. Since I started using Steam, I found this annoying. It's always been this little thing floating around, like you can get a refund for one title on Steam if the support rep deems that you're able to, and then after that, you can just never again get a refund, is the way that it used to work. It was just like a one-time thing, and then you've used up their patience, and you can never get a refund ever again. So, but I mean, that refund was pretty much no questions asked from my understanding, but it was still kind of ridiculous that you could only ever refund one item. It's like, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense from any standpoint. But if you take a look at Origin's refund policy, which they've had in place for a long time, you can absolutely return game downloads and third-party titles on Origin for a full refund within 24 hours after you first launch the game, within 7 days from your date of purchase, or within 7 days from the game's release date if you pre-ordered, and it's whichever comes first. So, and then that's also extended to technical things. So if you purchase a new EA game within the first 30 days of the release date and can't play it due to technical reasons within EA's control, you can request a refund within 72 hours after you first launch the game instead of 24. So that's a thing. And then, like, that was actually pretty much the most consumer-friendly refund policy that I'd seen from any digital distribution platform was from EA, ironically enough. And then there's also GOG has had a refund policy for quite a long time, the money back guarantee, which is a little bit different because it's the GOG money back guarantee only applies to bugs. So if you get a game and it's really buggy or it just doesn't work on your platform, they will do whatever they can to make it work for you. And if they cannot resolve your problem, they will give you a refund. So that's fine. Just to try and be thorough, I did take a look at Uplay's refund policy, and it seems that you are not allowed to refund digital purchases there. But overall, my point is more that other platforms have had a refund policy for a very long time, that I'm really glad that Valve has finally decided that that's something that they're going to allow, because I feel like having it not be allowed to refund titles is just blatantly ridiculous. Doesn't make any sense. It's completely consumer unfriendly. And I mean, having a refund system, again, Total Biscuit really said it best. It increases consumer confidence, which is true, because if you have the ability to refund a game for pretty much any reason, then it's actually a lot easier to justify spending the money than it is to, like, you don't have to be as wary of new titles. Now, so overall, I would say that this change is definitely a net positive for Steam overall, especially, and I mean, even on a wider scale, because Steam has such a, like, an absolute stranglehold on the PC gaming market, that them implementing a refund policy like this will encourage their competitors, such as Uplay, to do the same thing in order to remain competitive. So Valve finally implementing a refund policy is great, not just for people who use Steam only, but also for everybody else that uses every other digital platform as well, because it means that in order to remain competitive, they will have to eventually, is the hope, offer some sort of refund policy similar to this. So overall, I think it's definitely a net positive. So yeah, like it's great. I'm super happy that they finally started offering refunds, because there were lots of games where it was like, why is this game available for sale on the Steam store? And you know what? I think it was okay, the refund system, when their store was carefully curated, because I actually do remember, and a lot of people do actually, it wasn't that long ago, when Steam was actually pretty carefully curated, and getting on there, especially for an indie title, was like a huge deal to get onto Steam. It was like, if you get on there, your game can be a success. If you don't, then you're probably going to fail, because you just won't get the volume of sales that you need in order to have a profitable game, especially for indie titles that kind of rely on, like, getting the feature spot was so important. Whereas now they've stopped curating nearly as much. I think you definitely have to have things opened up for refunds at this point. Because, I mean, back in the olden days, you could kind of trust that most titles that were on Steam were going to work properly. Like, I can't remember anything on there that was just blatantly broken. Whereas these days, you can actually find quite a few games on there that are questionable at the very least. Like, if you look at Red Bit Ninja, a game that I reviewed the other day, I'm not sure if the review will be up before or after this video or whatever, but Red Bit Ninja, basically a platformer released on Steam for $10, claims it had Steam trading card support, which it just blatantly doesn't have, if that matters to you. It doesn't have controller support, doesn't have resolution options, doesn't have rebindable keys, the tutorial just doesn't work. So it just has a whole host of problems, and it's super buggy, and it's available on Steam for $10. Well, I mean, like, overall, that's just not an acceptable platformer release in 2015. So, I mean, stuff like that is on Steam these days, so not having a refund policy is really not okay, in my opinion. So that's why this is such a good change. With some more questionable games showing up on Steam, and even a lot of bad AAA releases lately, we've had a bunch of problems with games being broken at launch, or super buggy, or whatever, or just completely unoptimized for no apparent reason. So having a refund policy is a really big net positive in all ways. On the other hand, I have read some interesting articles that I don't necessarily agree with, but I feel are definitely worth sharing. So, you might be wondering, if you haven't heard about the little, like, I don't know, arguments against the Valve refund system, you might be wondering, like, what anybody could really have against such a system. It's because it's super consumer friendly, it's a net positive, all this sort of thing. Well, I saw a pretty interesting article posted on pastemagazine.com, and it was written by Cameron, I think, Kunzelman. Sorry, I apologize if I pronounced her name incorrectly. But basically, their main qualm with the new refund system is that 2 hours is portrayed as not being a substantial amount of time to spend in a game, which I would argue is actually true. A lot of the games that people stick with are longer than 2 hours. It's not all that common to pick up a game and then have it last less than 2 hours and feel satisfied with that experience. I'm I mean, I could be totally wrong. And again, I'm not going to say that there aren't a lot of games that are under 2 hours, because I think there totally are. But I just think it's this thing where basically their main point is that 2 hours is portrayed as not a substantial amount of time, and one of their things that they do as a game developer, that Cameron does, is they develop a lot of commercial titles that are under 2 hours in game time, and they feel a little bit like this just portrays games that are under 2 hours long as not welcome on Steam, because it's almost like they are saying, well, if you played it for under 2 hours, then you haven't really gotten your full money's worth, so now we can give you your refund. Like, you know what I mean? But I would argue, and I don't know, generally there seems to be a bit of a fear that games that are, well, first of all, that games that are under 2 hours in length are not considered like a full experience and therefore are not welcome on Steam. And number two, it seems to be that people are afraid of some massive, like, refund scam where games that are under 2 hours will be played through, like bought, played through, and then refunded afterwards by, I don't know, I assume that they're afraid of a large number of people doing it, because otherwise, why care? Well, I think that both of those things are a little bit of a stretch, because, well, let's take a look at it this way. When you're implementing a policy, it's best if you implement a policy, or a law is another way to look at it. Policy or law, you want it to apply to as many things as possible. So you don't want a policy that will be constantly contradicted by so many other things, and then you just want it to be generally what is okay. So for a refund policy, it's impossible for them to say, if you buy The Witcher 3, you can play for up to 4 hours and then refund it. But if you buy Red Bit Ninja, you can only play an hour, 30 minutes, and then refund it. Anything longer than that, like, they can't set separate deadlines for each game. I mean, on Valve's end, they can't do that. So I think that's a bit of an unrealistic stretch, because if you think of a refund policy, what they were trying to do with that 2 hours thing is they were trying to protect games that were shorter, and games that are just medium length. Like, they're trying to protect those games from somebody getting the full experience and then refunding it. But like, it's kind of ironic. People that have shorter games are actually a little bit worried about it now. And again, I just feel like that's a little bit of a stretch, because it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. If somebody enjoyed your game, I don't think it's very likely that they would then turn around and refund it so that you get nothing. That doesn't seem realistic. That seems like a bit of so I don't know. That's a little bit curious. I'm not quite sure why people are so afraid of that because Valve has also stated that they will be monitoring the system to avoid abuse. And although normally I would be on your side with that and be like, well, Valve does a bad job monitoring things. Like look at Greenlight, look at their own store. But if you take a look at the refund system, it makes a lot of sense. It is in Valve's best interest to protect both consumers because it gives them confidence and like confidence which is then used to justify purchases and to protect developers and publishers because Valve gets a cut of every sale on Steam. So they're not going to want people to be getting these false refunds because that screws them over too. So overall, I would say Steam refunds, in conclusion, Steam refunds are a net positive both for Steam, for consumers, and the industry as a whole because Steam refunds give consumers protection from a lot of things. Like if you look back at Space Base DF9, a lot of people were unsatisfied with the state that the game was left in. And while this wouldn't necessarily apply under the 2 hours rule, I think you could make your case to them, and then they may or may not honor your request. So at least you have a chance now, whereas before it was like, well, if you've already done the one game thing, you just can't. So that's just the thing. It protects consumers a lot better than what was being done before. It's a net positive. And then for the PC industry in general, because it means that other competitors will be obligated to do the same thing, and because it means that Origin implementing this policy and GOG having a policy encouraged Valve to implement a policy as well. So everyone's remaining competitive, which again is a net positive for the consumer. And I also believe that short games are not going to substantially suffer because of this policy because if Valve sees a lot of abuse, it will be shut down. It's absolutely not in their best interest to have people abusing the system that they've set up. They are losing out on sales if they do that. So you know what? This is going to be good. I'm sure of that, and hopefully Valve will continue moving down this direction in the future. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.